I tested a simple 17-day protocol with over 500 seniors, and the results were hard to ignore. Many saw noticeable drops in their blood pressure, some within days. The surprising part? It wasn't complicated, expensive, or extreme. In this video, I'll walk you through exactly what we did and why it worked for so many people. Before I give you the protocol, I need to give you the foundation. Because if you do not understand why these interventions work at the physiological level, you will not do them consistently. And consistency is the entire difference between a protocol that changes your numbers and a protocol that sits on a piece of paper. High blood pressure, hypertension, is not a single problem. That is the first thing standard medical advice gets wrong when it talks to seniors. It is treated as a single problem, managed with a single category of solutions. Medications that either relax blood vessel walls, slow the heart rate, or push excess fluid out through the kidneys. These medications work. I prescribe them. I am not telling you to stop taking yours, but in the bodies of people over 68, high blood pressure is almost never a single-cause problem. It is the visible surface of a system that has been accumulating dysfunction across multiple biological pathways simultaneously, and treating only one pathway, which is what any single medication does, leaves the others running unchecked. Research published in the journal Hypertension identified 4 primary physiological drivers of elevated blood pressure in adults over 65. Arterial stiffness, the progressive hardening of blood vessel walls that reduces their ability to flex and absorb the pressure of each heartbeat. Sympathetic nervous system overdrive, a state of chronic low-grade physiological stress activation that keeps the body in a persistent mild fight-or-flight response, elevating heart rate and vessel tension continuously. Sodium-potassium imbalance, a disruption in the ratio of these two minerals at the cellular level that directly controls how much fluid your blood vessels are holding at any given moment. And endothelial dysfunction, deterioration in the thin inner lining of your blood vessels that reduces their production of nitric oxide, the molecule responsible for keeping vessel walls relaxed and flexible. The protocol I developed targets all 4 of these drivers simultaneously, not sequentially, not one at a time, all 4 at once, across a 17-day period specifically designed to match the timeline on which these physiological changes become measurable. That is why it works when generic advice does not. Generic advice targets one driver. This targets 4. The first element of the protocol takes place before breakfast, before coffee, before you check your phone, in the first 23 minutes after you open your eyes. Here is what the research shows about blood pressure and the morning hours that almost nobody in routine clinical practice ever explains to patients. Blood pressure follows a circadian rhythm. It is not static across the day. In healthy adults, blood pressure drops by 10 to 20% during sleep, a phenomenon called nocturnal dipping, and then rises sharply in the early morning hours as the body prepares to transition from sleep to waking activity. This morning surge is driven by a simultaneous spike in cortisol, a rise in sympathetic nervous system activity, and an increase in platelet aggregation. Research published in the journal Circulation has shown that this morning surge period, roughly 6 a.m. to noon, accounts for a disproportionate share of cardiovascular events including heart attacks and strokes. Not because morning is inherently dangerous, but because in people with uncontrolled or undertreated hypertension, the morning surge pushes an already elevated baseline into a critical range. What you do in the first 23 minutes after waking either dampens that surge or amplifies it, and most seniors are inadvertently amplifying it with their morning routine. Here is what the protocol requires in those first 23 minutes. Step 1. Before you stand up from bed, spend 3 minutes in slow, deliberate nasal breathing. Inhale for 4 counts through your nose. Hold for 2 counts. Exhale for 6 counts through your nose. Do this lying down before your feet touch the floor. Research from the journal Frontiers in Physiology has shown that slow-paced nasal breathing at 6 breath cycles per minute activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's calming system, and produces measurable reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure within 3 to 5 minutes. You are beginning the day by down-regulating your sympathetic nervous system before it has a chance to spike. That 3-minute window sets the physiological tone for everything that follows. Step 2. Within 5 minutes of standing, drink 16 ounces of room temperature water, not cold water, room temperature. Cold water triggers a mild sympathetic response in some individuals. Room temperature water hydrates without that activation signal. Overnight, your body has lost fluid through respiration and any nighttime urination. Even mild dehydration, a fluid deficit of as little as 1 to 2% of body weight, causes your blood to thicken slightly, which forces your heart to work harder to push it through your vessels, which raises blood pressure. Rehydrating within 5 minutes of waking begins correcting that deficit before it can affect your morning readings. Step 3. Within 15 minutes of waking, get your eyes exposed to natural outdoor light for a minimum of 5 minutes. Not through a window, outside, or with a door open. Natural morning light suppresses residual melatonin, anchors your circadian rhythm, and signals to your body that the day has begun in a way that indoor lighting cannot replicate. Research from the journal Sleep Medicine Reviews has shown that circadian disruption, a misaligned internal clock, is an independent driver of blood pressure elevation in adults over 65. Anchoring your clock every single morning with natural light is one of the simplest, most evidence-supported blood pressure interventions available, and it costs absolutely nothing. I want to be clear about something before I walk you through the nutritional component of this protocol. I am not going to give you a diet. Diets fail because they require you to replace your entire relationship with food simultaneously. What I am going to give you is a nutritional architecture, specific additions and specific reductions, timed precisely, that work on the physiology we discussed without requiring you to overhaul how you eat. The first and most important nutritional intervention targets the sodium-potassium imbalance that drives blood pressure in the majority of seniors, and I need you to understand something about this imbalance that the standard advice, eat less salt, consistently gets wrong. The problem is not simply that most Americans eat too much sodium. The problem is that most Americans eat too much sodium and not nearly enough potassium. These two minerals work in opposition at the cellular level. Sodium pulls fluid into your blood vessels. Potassium pulls fluid out of them. The ratio between them determines how much pressure your vessels are holding. Research published in the New England Journal of Medicine tracking over 100,000 adults across 18 countries found that the sodium to potassium ratio was a stronger predictor of cardiovascular events than sodium intake alone. The average American over 65 consumes roughly 3,400 milligrams of sodium daily and roughly 2,300 milligrams of potassium. The target ratio for blood pressure management in this age group is approximately 1:1, which means the intervention is not primarily about removing sodium, though reducing processed food intake accomplishes that as a natural side effect. It is about dramatically increasing potassium. The protocol requires 3,500 to 4,700 milligrams of potassium daily from food sources, not supplements. Food. Potassium from food is absorbed differently and more safely than potassium from supplements, which in high doses can cause cardiac rhythm problems, particularly in patients on certain blood pressure medications. Your potassium sources within this protocol are sweet potatoes, which contain 950 milligrams per medium potato. Avocado, which contains 975 milligrams per fruit. White beans, which contain over 1,000 milligrams per half cup. Spinach, which contains 840 milligrams per cooked cup. And salmon, which contains 780 milligrams per 6-ounce serving. 2 servings from this list daily, distributed across meals, puts most patients within the target potassium range without any other dietary modification. The second nutritional intervention targets endothelial dysfunction and nitric oxide production. Your blood vessel lining produces nitric oxide by converting a compound called nitrate, found naturally in certain foods, into a bioavailable form your body can use. The most nitrate-dense food available is beetroot. Research published in the journal Hypertension, a landmark study from Queen Mary University of London, showed that daily beetroot juice consumption reduced systolic blood pressure by an average of 8 millimeters of mercury in adults with hypertension. A single glass of beetroot juice daily. 8 millimeters of mercury systolic reduction. That is equivalent to the effect of a starting dose of most antihypertensive medications. The protocol requires 200 milliliters, roughly 7 ounces, of beetroot juice or 2 small cooked beets daily, consumed with lunch, not in the morning with medications, as beetroot can affect the absorption of certain drugs. With lunch, dark leafy greens, spinach, arugula, Swiss chard, are the secondary nitrate source in the protocol. 1 large handful of raw leafy greens or 1 cup cooked daily provides sufficient additional nitrate to meaningfully support nitric oxide production. The third nutritional intervention targets arterial stiffness through magnesium. Magnesium is the mineral most directly involved in blood vessel relaxation. It is required for smooth muscle cells in vessel walls to release tension, and magnesium deficiency affects an estimated 70% of Americans over 65, driven by reduced absorption in the aging gut, increased urinary losses caused by certain blood pressure medications, including thiazide diuretics, and chronically low dietary intake. Let me tell you what I hear from seniors more than almost anything else when the subject of exercise and blood pressure comes up. My doctor told me to walk more, so I walk every day. And my blood pressure is still high, I believe them. And the research supports what they are experiencing. Walking is beneficial. It is not sufficient as a sole exercise intervention for blood pressure management in adults over 68. And the reason why comes back to the 4 physiological drivers we discussed at the beginning. Walking, steady-state aerobic exercise at low to moderate intensity, addresses sympathetic nervous system overdrive effectively. It reduces cortisol. It activates the parasympathetic system. These are real benefits that contribute meaningfully to blood pressure reduction. But walking does not meaningfully address arterial stiffness. It does not produce the endothelial adaptations that improve nitric oxide production, and it does not generate the hemodynamic stress, the specific pattern of blood flow challenge that signals vessel walls to become more flexible over time. The intervention that does all 3 is isometric exercise, and the research behind it is among the most consistently replicated findings in exercise cardiology of the last decade. Isometric exercise means contracting a muscle against resistance without movement. The muscle activates fully and holds. The classic example is the wall sit, sitting against a wall with your thighs parallel to the floor, knees at 90 degrees, back flat against the wall, holding that position for a sustained period. Another example is the isometric hand grip, squeezing a tennis ball or a grip strengthener at approximately 30% of maximum effort and holding for 2 minutes. A meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine analyzing 270 randomized controlled trials found that isometric exercise produced the largest blood pressure reductions of any exercise modality studied, larger than aerobic exercise, larger than resistance training, larger than high-intensity interval training. The average systolic reduction from isometric exercise protocols was 8.24 millimeters of mercury. The average diastolic reduction was 4 millimeters of mercury. These are numbers that rival pharmaceutical intervention. The protocol requires isometric exercise 4 days per week, not daily. The vascular adaptations that produce blood pressure reduction require a 48-hour recovery window between sessions. Each session consists of 4 rounds of the wall sit, holding for 45 seconds per round with 90 seconds of rest between rounds. Patients with knee conditions perform the isometric hand grip instead. 4 rounds of 2-minute holds at 30% maximum effort with 90 seconds rest between rounds. The wall sit sessions take 8 minutes including rest periods, 8 minutes, 4 days per week, producing blood pressure reductions equivalent to starting a medication. I told you at the beginning of this video that I was saving the most important element for last. This is it. Of all the variables I tracked across 500 patients over 17 days, sleep quality was the single strongest predictor of blood pressure response. Patients who improved their sleep during the protocol period showed blood pressure reductions nearly double those of patients whose sleep remained poor. Patients who were already sleeping adequately showed the strongest response to the nutritional and exercise components. Patients who were sleeping poorly showed blunted responses to everything else, as if the other interventions were running uphill. This is not surprising when you understand the physiology. During deep sleep, blood pressure naturally drops by 10 to 20%, that nocturnal dipping we discussed earlier. This nightly dip is not optional. It is a required maintenance window for your cardiovascular system. During that dip, your blood vessels experience reduced pressure. That reduced pressure period is when vascular repair mechanisms activate. It is when inflammatory markers in vessel walls decrease. It is when the endothelial lining regenerates. When deep sleep is insufficient, that maintenance window shrinks or disappears. Vessel walls accumulate damage without adequate repair time. Inflammation in vessel walls increases, and blood pressure the following day starts from a higher baseline. Research published in the journal Sleep found that adults getting less than 6 hours of sleep per night had a 20% higher risk of hypertension than those sleeping 7 to 8 hours. Adults with poor sleep quality, measured by the frequency of nighttime awakenings and percentage of time spent in deep sleep, showed elevated blood pressure independent of sleep duration. It is not just about hours, it is about architecture. The protocol addresses sleep through 4 specific interventions timed to the circadian biology of adults over 68. The first is temperature. Your body initiates sleep by dropping its core temperature. This process is impaired in adults over 70 because of the thermoregulatory changes that occur with aging. Your bedroom temperature needs to support that core temperature drop. The protocol requires a bedroom temperature between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit during sleep hours, not 70, not 72, 65 to 68. Research from the journal Cell has shown that sleeping in this temperature range increases time spent in deep sleep by measurable amounts compared to sleeping in warmer environments. The second is magnesium timing. The magnesium glycinate supplement I mentioned in the nutritional section is taken with dinner specifically, not in the morning, not at lunch, because magnesium activates GABA receptors in the brain that promote sleep onset and deep sleep maintenance. Taken 4 to 5 hours before bed, magnesium glycinate has been shown in research published in the Journal of Research in Medical Sciences to reduce the time it takes to fall asleep, reduce nighttime awakenings, and increase self-reported sleep quality in adults over 65. The third is light management. After 7 p.m., the protocol requires elimination of overhead lighting in favor of low, warm-toned lamps positioned below eye level. Overhead, bright light suppresses melatonin production through the eye's direct connection to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, your brain's master clock. Melatonin production in adults over 68 is already reduced compared to younger adults. Preserving whatever melatonin production remains by eliminating overhead bright light after 7 p.m. meaningfully accelerates sleep onset and improves sleep depth. The fourth intervention is the one that produced the most resistance from patients when I introduced it and the most gratitude after they tried it. I call it the 20-minute decompression window. Every evening, beginning 20 minutes before their intended sleep time, patients were required to sit quietly, no television, no phone, no reading, in a dimly lit room and perform the same slow nasal breathing from the morning anchor, 4 counts in, 2 counts hold, 6 counts out, for 20 minutes. The research basis for this is the documented effect of slow breathing on baroreflex sensitivity, the sensitivity of your body's own blood pressure regulation system. Baroreflex sensitivity decreases with age and with hypertension. It is the system that detects changes in blood pressure and signals your blood vessels and heart rate to compensate. When baroreflex sensitivity is low, your body is slower to correct blood pressure spikes. When it is high, your body manages pressure fluctuations more efficiently and automatically. Slow nasal breathing practiced consistently has been shown in research published in the journal Hypertension to improve baroreflex sensitivity within 2 weeks of daily practice. Improved baroreflex sensitivity at night reduces the morning blood pressure surge the following day. Here's exactly what the 17 days looked like for my 500 patients so you can implement it starting tomorrow. Every morning, within 23 minutes of waking, 3 minutes of slow nasal breathing lying down before standing, 16 ounces of room temperature water within 5 minutes of standing, 5 minutes of natural outdoor light within 15 minutes of waking. Breakfast includes 1 potassium-rich food from the protocol list, 1 ounce of almonds or pumpkin seeds daily, every lunch, 200 milliliters of beetroot juice or 2 small cooked beets, 1 large handful of dark leafy greens. A second potassium-rich food from the protocol list, every dinner, magnesium glycinate 200 milligrams taken with the meal, a protein source that also provides potassium, salmon, white beans, or chicken with a large portion of cooked spinach. Overhead lights off after 7 p.m., 4 days per week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. 8 minutes of wall sit protocol, 4 rounds, 45 seconds each, 90 seconds rest between rounds. 3 days per week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. 25 minutes of moderate-paced walking outdoors when possible, every evening, 20 minutes before sleep. The decompression breathing window, bedroom cooled to 65 to 68 degrees before lying down. That is the complete protocol. Every element is evidence-based. Every element is actionable without a prescription, without a gym membership, and without overhauling your life. And implemented consistently across 17 days, it produced measurable blood pressure reduction in every single one of my 500 patients.